Blanche, the attorney for Donald Trump that met the scorn of Judge Merchan, who I just want to read you the very specific quote after those proceedings. Quote, "You're losing all credibility. You're losing all credibility with the court. I have to tell you," the words of Judge Merchan to Donald Trump's attorney. Now, why is this? Todd Blanche was struggling to respond to two specific points in his defense of Donald Trump's social media posts. Number one, for those that were in the words of Donald Trump, he was saying that his client was simply responding to attacks against him from the likes of Stormy Daniels and Michael Cohen. But when Judge Merchan asked, "Name me specifically which posts those were," Todd Blanche was unable to give specifics. In the second one were multiple reposts on his Truth Social account, and Todd Blanche was not able to specifically answer whether Donald Trump was, in fact, endorsing those, other than saying that they were not actual statements by Donald Trump. And now, for history's sake, number one, the prosecution said, look, Donald Trump has boasted in the past about how many people read his posts on social media, including on Truth Social. And I actually went back to the archives. In 2015, Donald Trump was asked specifically whether his retweets equaled endorsements. And he said, quote, "Well, I do retweets, and I mean, to a certain extent, I do. Yeah, I think that's right. Do you want me to say no? You know, I retweet for a reason." Now, they are currently in break here. They are about to reconvene the court in which David Pecker, will take the stand again. But as to that gag order, Jose, Judge Merchan said that he is going to reserve his judgment on whether Donald Trump has actually violated it, but it is not clear what his timeline is of when he will make the determination of whether Donald Trump is, number one, fined, and whether he will warn Donald Trump that he could serve jail time if, in fact, he were to violate the gag order again.
Unbelievable, Charles. And this is just in the early morning before the first witness even takes the stand. How would you describe this morning?
This is not the start that you want if you're Donald Trump or his defense attorneys. And quite frankly, Jose, I've been talking to a number of us on the panel, and I'm surprised that Todd Blanche, being as accomplished an attorney as he is, did not have a better explanation and response for some of the questions that Judge Merchan has thrown at him. These are not necessarily complicated things. And while I understand that you are primarily focused on Donald Trump and his defense at trial, you've had several days to put together a plausible argument as to why you should be able to win this hearing against the prosecution and their motion. And the examples for, in the instance of he was responding to Stormy Daniels, you could have easily put together a few tweets if, in fact, this was the answer that you planned to give. And so, quite frankly, I'm surprised. This is not a good thing. And the fact that the judge has said you're losing credibility as a defense attorney, as a trial attorney, this early in a trial is not somewhere you want to be.
I mean, what do you say if you are Trump's attorney and the judge is asking you for specifics about a gag order that was very clearly written and specified?
You have to have the answers. I mean, there really is no excuse for walking into court unprepared. One thing I never heard in all my years as a prosecutor from any judge, many of whom disagreed with me or denied my motions, was that I was losing credibility with the court. And that is a dagger for anybody in a court of law. And if you lose your credibility, Jose, it's very, very hard to get it back. And by the way, you may need it at the end. And so, I don't envy Mr. Blanche for a number of reasons. He should, not just he, anybody walking into court should be prepared. I don't think it was that difficult to anticipate what the questions might be. There weren't that many tweets at issue. They were all, posted in some way. As Mr. Trump's lawyer, it's your obligation to know that and to be able to explain it. You might lose, but you don't want to lose and lose your credibility.
I'm just wondering, just the four of you that have vast experience, do you recall a time or more than once where a judge early on in a case said to one of the litigants, either the defense or the prosecution, you are losing credibility with this court early on? Do any of you remember that happening?
I've seen judges admonish attorneys. I've seen the body language and all of the indicia of that being the sentiment, but never have I heard it expressly said, you're losing credibility. I've heard this is not a plausible argument. I'm suspect. These
yeah, but that's different than
arguments, but these are
stating.
different.
That's different than a judge stating, you know, when everybody is under, you know, they're under the judicial proceedings underway, to say you are losing credibility. What do you see there?
Oh, man, that is definitely reputationally damaging. I have never seen it happen to a colleague or an opposing counsel or myself, and I'm thankful that I haven't. But it can be really detrimental to one's reputation. But the thing about it, too, I think not only the comment, but to say it in front of one's client is equally as damaging. And obviously the client in this case is Trump. But my goodness, can you imagine how much, even though Todd Blanche is a well-respected attorney, having your client hear you be admonished in that way by the court has got to diminish your ability to think, oh my goodness, I've selected the right attorney. And that's
what does Blanche and the rest of the team do now, and what are they thinking on how they overcome this very clear obstacle? I mean, from the bench, the judge says you are losing credibility.
If I were them, I would probably be trying to pull together some sort of letter to the judge, something else to basically say, look, Your Honor, you know, based on the things that you said in court, here are some other things that we've brought to bear to try to kind of repair the damage. It's damage control time, because what happens when you're losing, you know, it's reputation overall, fine. Todd Blanche has kind of made his bet that he's riding on the Trump train now, and that's his decision. Reputationally, that opens up a whole lot of things that aren't worth talking about right now. What does it mean in the context of this case? Every time he stands up to object, he's now got less credibility. Every time that there's anything that comes up with a piece of evidence, he's going to have less credibility. If this gets to a conviction and then we're in a sentencing phase, he's going to have less credibility. And none of those things are good. All of those things are bad. And so he's got to get into damage control quick.
So, Kristen, the judge is saying that he's going to reserve a decision on gag order violations and what to do about it. What do you think about that?
I think it's going to be tough, because if he doesn't make a decision right away, it really runs the risk of Trump continuing to engage in potentially violative behavior. But again, judges are regular people. He now has heard the arguments. Judge is basically saying, let me digest the arguments, let me take some time, speak to my law clerk, look at the law again, and really determine whether or not Trump violated the order. So what it really does tell me is that this judge is being conscientious, despite the fact that he has publicly stated to the opposing counsel, to Trump's counsel, hey, you're losing credibility. He is still taking a conscientious view and going to make a conscientious decision.
So even while Merchan was saying that Trump's main attorney has been losing credibility, just seconds after that, essentially, when there was this break that is now they're resuming, but they haven't as of right now, started the testimony of David Pecker. But during that time, here's what was coming out of Truth Social and former President Trump. So let's look at that together, and I'm just going to highly conflicted. To put it mildly, Judge Juan Merchan has taken away my constitutional right to free speech. Everybody is allowed to talk, and I can't read the rest of it there, but you could lie about me, but I'm not allowed to defend myself. This is a kangaroo court, and the judge should recuse himself. That's kind of an interesting tactic.
Well, it is. I mean, the gag order by itself permits Mr. Trump to criticize the judge. So that is probably not violative. But, you know, I'm a big baseball fan, Jose. I think it would be a bad strategy as you're walking to the mound at the top of the first inning to stop by home plate and tell the umpire he sucks. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And there are 9 innings to play. And so attacking the judge, even if it's within the confines of the order, right, doesn't really help you at trial. I think that was Tristan's point. They should be in damage control. You got to try and right the ship. Maybe you apologize. Maybe you find some other way to
apologize about what, though?
I wasn't clear, Your Honor, and I do think there's an argument to be made for Mr. Trump. He is running for president, and that puts him in a different category than any other criminal defendant. I agree with you that some of these tweets and reposts are troubling, but I don't think they're violative because my client didn't intend to violate your order. You try and pull it back. But there's no, you don't start screaming at the umpire before you've thrown a pitch.
And then when the umpire makes an aside, and then you scream again and you insult again. I mean, is there some logic to this?
So before the trial begins, yes. This is a strategy that we've seen Donald Trump employ in all of his criminal cases, and I like to call it, to further your sports analogy, because I've been using the same one, putting pressure on the refs. Donald Trump is aware that there is no judge who really wants to be responsible for actually penalizing him to the point of putting him in jail. He also knows that it's a logistical nightmare for any law enforcement agencies to go through the machinations of what will take to actually hold him in jail for contempt. He's aware of this. Not just that, but if a judge decides to do that, he has now created an appealable issue, at least in his mind, or one that he's going to contest. So that's something that before trial, I understand somewhat the logic. Do I like it? Do I agree with it as a strategy? No, but I get what he's trying to do, because on one hand, if he does get penalized, now he becomes more of a martyr as Donald Trump the candidate, and if he doesn't, he becomes more of a rebel as Donald Trump the defendant.
Vaughn Hilliard outside the courthouse. We're still awaiting the beginning of the testimony by David Pecker.
Right. Judge Merchan said he was going to be back on the bench here at 11 a.m. Eastern time, but 13 minutes have passed and he has yet to re-enter the courtroom at this time. But well, listening to your guys' conversation, if I may, right, Donald Trump has shown a willingness to play only one playbook, and that is to attack judges, attack prosecutors. And folks will recall, just in the last year, it not only led to a defamation suit from E. Jean Carroll in which he repeatedly defamed her even after the judgment against him and the threat from E. Jean Carroll to file an additional lawsuit. He has since continued to make the statements that led to the very defamation suit that cost him $87 million in the first place. And the other one was, if we go back to the civil fraud trial in the fall, folks will recall that Donald Trump was fined and held in contempt by Judge Engoron after he was warned and a gag order was placed on him to not attack court staff. But after he repeatedly attacked the principal law clerk to Judge Engoron, ultimately he was fined $10,000 and held in contempt for violating that gag order. So Donald Trump has a history that he's already shown predating this trial that he is willing to continue to attack. And as you just read from that social media post, he clearly has not had his constitutional right or been punished for violating the gag order at this point yet. Even during this recess, got on his phone and continued to attack the very individual that could ultimately be the one to put him in jail if he were found to have violated that very gag order.
I mean, Tristan, one of the prosecutors said earlier on, again, this was earlier on this morning, quote, "We're not yet seeking an incarceratory penalty. The defendant seems to be angling for that." What does that mean, and what does that tell you?
I think he is. I think that's what he's been doing this whole time. He sees this as a win-win. This comes Trump sees this as a win-win. This is very much straight from Trump's playbook. It's one of the major moves to the hoop that he has, if we're going to continue with the sports analogies.
Boy,
he's got